thank you both to our wonderful alums for being here. Really how this is going to function is I have some questions. We'll hear from our alums about their experiences, and then we'll have time most likely at the end for you all to come up and ask questions as well. You can come right on up to the camera, actually be able to talk to them face to face. But I really want to thank Claire and Emma for both being here today. I know you all have busy things going on, but I would love if you could start just by kind of introducing yourself and talking about your current professional role that you're in.
Hi, everyone. My name is Clare Doyle. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated from Wellesley in 2020 with a major in international relations and economics. I currently work at an economic consulting firm called Cornerstone Research. What that means is I basically do math for lawyers. But yeah, that's the intro.
Awesome. Emma?
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma. I use they, she pronouns, and I am a very fresh grad. I am class of 2022. I majored in biology and minored in women and gender studies. And right now I am a first year post-bac or post-baccalaureate research fellow at the National Institutes of Health, specifically NIAID, or allergy and infectious disease, where I study the genetic diversity and viral evolution of COVID-19. So basically I do a mix of like wet lab work and then computational analysis work. Super excited to be here, but like I said, I'm a very fresh grad, so feel free to take what works and then leave what doesn't with my advice.
And I'm just so excited to have both of you here, knowing that, you know, Claire worked in the career ed office and Emma saw a lot of us pretty frequently. And I think you both stay in touch as alums, which is super exciting. So thank you for being here. Really, what we want the focus of this conversation to be is around that kind of dreaded major declaration deadline. There's a lot going on. I think that's often on a lot of students' minds is kind of, you know, what should my major be? What is that going to lead to in the future? How do I make that decision? And so what factors would you say went into your decision to select the major or majors that you did? And what advice would you give to our sophomores as they consider their own major decisions?
Emma, do you want to start? I can start. Okay, go for it.
Okay. I'll start. We'll switch off or something. I'll start this time.
That sounds good.
So this is probably, unfortunately, the worst answer I can give, and I'm so sorry, but I actually entered Wellesley kind of already having an inkling about studying biology. Please don't feel like you have to do that. You know, please don't feel like you have to come to Wellesley already having, you know, knowing your major. But I'll share kind of an important caveat, I guess, that I set for myself when I was a sophomore and, you know, trying to definitely make this decision, which was really just to be very honest with myself to make sure I wasn't like forcing myself to study this because, you know, it's something I already had in mind. And you've probably heard this a couple times already, but really taking classes like in the department that you're interested in, as well as like very broadly outside of it, was super, super helpful in helping me basically make sure that biology was the right fit for me, as opposed to, you know, something closely related. So, you know, you could really apply that to, I think, a lot of different majors at Wellesley. So maybe it's the difference between sociology and anthropology for you, or neuroscience and like cognitive sciences or something like that, or physics and astronomy. So I think just making sure to really kind of sample all the classes you can before it's time to make that declaration. I would also really encourage folks to go to open houses if they haven't like happened or started already, because that was absolutely pivotal for me, you know, hearing from upperclassmen about kind of the realities of the major besides, you know, what you see on the department website. It was super helpful in basically allowing me to have more realistic expectations of what pursuing the major would be like, and, you know, making sure I could gauge accurately, can I handle this? Do I want to handle this? Would I rather do something else instead? But overall, I think I just want to say that everyone's situation is different. And I think the best thing you can do right now is just have some compassion for yourself. You know, it's hard, it's difficult. It seems like, you know, it's like probably first or second huge major life decision about, you know, what you're going to study. So just have some kindness for yourself. It's tough.
Well, and I think it's great the point you mentioned of like, can I handle it? And do I want to handle it? Because I think that's such an important thing to think about. It's different majors are challenging in different ways for different people. And so there's both considerations is, can I do it? Which I think for almost all students, the answer is always yes. But also, do I want to do it? Is that really something where I want to put my effort, my motivation? Or are there other things that I would want to study that would actually allow for you to really put in your energy and your effort and feel really excited about learning it? So I think that's a great distinction to kind of make sure.
Yeah, I can follow up on that. I would say I came into Wellesley very certain of a major that I wanted to do. I thought I was going to major in poli-sci and go work for the UN and do all this, like, you know, like all that kind of stuff. I really liked international relations. I like knew that that was kind of where I wanted to be. And so it ended up being like political science, econ, double majoring. They have this IR major at Wellesley. I wasn't like super sure where I fit in that nexus. And so as I kind of tried to parse that out, a big question for me was the can I do it of like, I had convinced myself I wasn't a math person. And so I was like, oh, this like whole econ thing is just not for me. I'm not a math person. I don't want to go work in an investment bank. Like, why would I do this whole thing? But I did take an econ class. It's like their IR major requires a certain like couple core classes across disciplines. And I like found myself really liking them. And like thinking that the work that I was doing there was really, really cool. And I liked the way of thinking about it. And I felt like I was learning tools to like think about the issues that I still cared about, which like were kind of more poli-sci issues. And so I think that like on that point of like, you definitely can do it. It can be done no matter what. And I think a really, really pivotal, like instrumental part for that for me was like, I was thinking of my favorite classes and I would just like go to the professor's office hours and be like, hey, like, is this class similar to what being an actual major in this thing is like? And sometimes the answer is yes. And sometimes the answer is kind of no. And so like, it's important to kind of get that distinction, right? Of like, oh no, this is a much more qualitative look at what economics is going to be. Or like, oh, this is like a very, very kind of niche part of what X, Y, and Z is that like you're the general major, like you can focus on that, but you're going to have to do a lot of other stuff too. And so if you're not interested in that other stuff, like that may not be the right choice for you. And so, yeah, I think getting a lot of like external feedback from upperclassmen that I knew, from professors, from career ed, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, like making the decision for myself. I think that my major advisor, or like a person that I really liked, who actually at the time was like the head of the IR econ major, told me not to do IR econ because he was like, oh, just do econ and poli-sci, they're the same thing. And I was like, you know what, like I actually really like this and I think that this is the best choice for me. And so like, not that I like was like, no, your advice sucks. Like, but like, I think taking in a lot of different things, but ultimately knowing that like, you know what's best for you. And so like not being overly swayed by like the variety of different kind of like opinions in the information environment about any particular major.
I think that's all great. And again, I think so much what I'm hearing from both of you is just talking to other people, talking to faculty, talking to students, talking to advisors, not feeling like it has to be, you know, something you figure out by yourself, but that ultimately it is a decision you need to make for yourself and that you can't just be swayed by, you know, other people's stories, but it is so important to hear from other people about what their experiences have been as well. Right? Cool. Nice.
Definitely. And can I add one more thing before we hop to the next question? Is that okay? I think also, you know, on the same note of like just being kind to yourself, you can do everything right and, you know, follow all of the advice from the folks that you talk to about deciding on a major, and maybe you've decided on a major that feels right at the time, and you can still end up doing something different, and that is totally fine. You know, your entire career trajectory is not totally decided by like your undergraduate major. Tons of people decide to pivot, you know, between undergraduate and graduate studies, or they take a job that they really like that ends up being in something else. Like, it does not make or break your professional career, you know? And so having like the perfect major plan and, you know, trying to find like the most tailored major to you, if you can, that's awesome. But, you know, don't stress yourself out super crazy trying to, you know, make it work, because sometimes it works for you in undergrad and then it just doesn't anymore for whatever reason after college. And that is totally fine.
That actually leads us perfectly into the next question. So thank you for that, Emma. But what aspects of your degree do you use in your current role? And also, what skills do you use in your job that you learned outside of your major requirements, that you learned in other classes or that you learned in other ways on campus?
Yeah, I can do this one. So my job, I think, is an interesting type of work where we kind of have one foot in the academia econ world and one foot in the industry world. And so the stuff that I learned in econ, like I use a lot. Like we are doing kind of like modeling and like thinking about problems like competition or like, I don't know, like antitrust, stuff like that. With that said, like we have people who work here that were physics majors and that like have never done any econ. So like it's skills that can be picked up. I think the main thing that I use at my job that I got from Wellesley, which like wasn't related to any particular major, was just the process of learning about something new, which like, because we work on different cases at my job, like I will get dropped into something and be like, oh, I have 2 weeks to become an expert on this thing I've never heard anything about before. And so like the breadth of your experience at Wellesley and like all the different types of classes that you take give you really good experience in learning how to think about problems. And so it's like, oh, if I have like this very broad topic ahead of me that I like want to investigate, like how do I break that down into steps? Like, what do I want to look at? What kind of questions are the smart questions to ask? Who are the right people to like look for guidance? And so I think that that's like the biggest thing that I use in my day-to-day is just like learning how to like learn something. Yeah.
And it's always fascinating to see it never stops. You're always learning something new. You're always learning something different. And I want to just take a quick second to introduce our final panelist. Hi, Kavi. How are you?
I'm so sorry.
That's fine. Kavi ran into some technical issues, but she's here, and we are so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much.
So if you wouldn't mind just doing kind of a quick introduction as to who you are, what you do for your current role, but also kind of what your major was at Wellesley, and how that's kind of impacted your current role and what you do now.
Sounds good. Also, if my laptop crashes at any point, I will join from my phone. So yeah, I'm in Seattle. I have no idea where to get a charger. So which is what this whole debacle was about. But my name is Kavi. I'm from Sri Lanka. So as an international student while I was at Wellesley, class of 2019. My major was in anthropology, and I also did a minor in film. Yeah, and what I do now is I have been in the education technology space for the past 3 to 4 years, education and then moving into education and technology. And my focus is really on early childhood education. So I run a company called Silly, where we design social emotional learning tools for 5 to 10-year-olds. So that's what we do. I recently moved away from a full-time job that I was doing. I was managing Tilly kind of as I would say my 5 to like 12 midnight job, and now focusing on what I love doing. So yeah, that's me in under a minute.
Perfect. And really what we're just kind of getting into was thinking about the skills that you learned as part of your major and your minor at Wellesley, and also thinking about the skills and the things that you learned outside of your major and kind of how those things all come together. So I'll give you a second to breathe because I know we just threw all this at you, but Emma, do you want to respond, and then we'll give Kavi a chance after?
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds good. I think I can just pick up where Claire left off, and then we can jump around however we need to. So yeah, I definitely agree with Claire, and I'll try and make my answer, as non-specific to biology as possible. But I think if I had to summarize it, in terms of, the skills that I learned inside my degree and major that I use the most, it is the ones that are kind of most helpful in managing an independent research project. And then kind of outside or more holistically throughout my time at Wellesley, the ones that I use have to do with kind of just helping me develop as a professional and a person. So I'll rewind really quickly. So specifically, I would say that on a conceptual basis, I use kind of like actual biology concepts from the most related courses the most. So for me, that's, genetics and evolution, but then also kind of, just the basic stuff that you can always fall back on because stuff goes wrong. And when stuff goes wrong, you just have to fall back to basics. So in terms of courses, I would say I rely most heavily on kind of the super specialized ones that I use a lot in my day-to-day work. And then also just kind of the general stuff when stuff goes wrong. In terms of kind of like the bench work that I do, it's also pretty much the same, because you're never going to do the kind of exact same experiment step by step that you do in college as you do in, wherever you might end up, but you will have some familiar aspects. You'll be pipetting, or you use, like a centrifuge or something. And then you'll also get tossed like a whole bunch of new protocols and reagents. So having the experience of just, being in lab is very helpful because it can be intimidating, all of these gadgets that you don't know how they work and, things that you have to do and learn how to do. And so just being in that space for a while and kind of knowing your way around the general structure of a lab was super, super helpful because, most labs kind of look the same. They have certain things that just kind of have to be there for safety reasons. And so that's always good to fall back on. In terms of outside of kind of, the biology major, which although it was a large part of my time at Wellesley, I definitely didn't want it to be all of it, so I really kind of took the time to kind of intentionally cultivate, a very well-deserved and healthy respect for stuff that isn't STEM, because I think one of the biggest things that I didn't want to end up happening to me was, just kind of be a one-track scientist who didn't have kind of the ability to think in kind of different dimensions and directions and kind of not really know what to do beyond the scientific method. So I think, having the liberal arts kind of very broad range of classes was just super, super pivotal in that, and I think the WGIS minor, particularly being able to kind of cultivate and develop like a social justice praxis before I came to my job has been just absolutely invaluable, especially because of the boom and the intersection of those topics because of the pandemic. Yeah,
of course. Awesome. So Kavi, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just pulled up the notes that I had from earlier, so I have some, a place to start. So I think just to briefly tell you a little bit about what happened after Wellesley very quickly. So just so that people can ground themselves in the story and have some context. So I majored in anthropology and film. I was actually an econ major for 2 years. So I had these very drastic shifts in, what I was passionate about. I remember walking across like Severance Green, like crying, going to Dean Tence's office, being like, I don't think I want to be an econ major anymore. I was like, I went to an investment bank and I don't like them. So, I mean, it's not like I didn't like them, but there was no fit. So I majored in anthropology and film, had absolutely kind of no idea what I was going to do. And then really stumbled into this world of design during my final years at doing anthropology. So my thesis was in design anthropology. So I was really digging into kind of this design world of designing products, doing user research, prototyping, breaking things apart and iterating. So I had kind of had a bit of an introduction to that world. And then the 2 things I did after Wellesley was I moved into user research roles. You call it UX research for anybody familiar. So essentially it means before you design a product, you ask users if they want to use it, if there is a need for it. So that blended well with anthropology because that's what I was doing in anthropology. I was trying to understand how people think, why people do as they do, or why people have certain behaviors and habits. So did that work for a bit and really wanted to come back to my world of education. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So I think for me, there are sort of these 3 big things that have always emerged. One is, I think, Emma, you alluded to it, and I think, Claire, you probably touched on it as well, but this idea of like seeing the systems thinking approach, that you're not just going into an education technology space saying, oh, I want to build this gamified learning tool for kids. And let's just bring a game designer and a developer together and ship it. You're always looking at what are the wider systems at play. What are the socioeconomic issues around it? What are the racial issues around this? How do I make this product equitable? How do I engage sort of wider stakeholders into the play? So you're always having kind of this, like somebody called me, oh, you're like a giraffe. I'm like, oh, that's a good way of talking about someone who has had a liberal arts kind of education, because you're always like a giraffe. You have this like a top view of like everything that's happening. So I think that's one. And I think the second one is, in whatever work you do, it's all about understanding what motivates people. Whether you're building a company, going into a company for the first time. And I think with Wellesley, you get to meet such a breadth of people. And also that experience in anthropology and liberal arts that lets you take an econ class and a geoscience class and then a math class. You really tend to understand what motivates people and what fears and aspirations people have. That's always at the core of whatever you do, and you sit across the person. If you're able to peel through the layers and see what is it that motivates that person, it always makes things easier. And I think the third thing that comes to mind is kind of this idea of prototyping. Because I think at Wellesley, you're always like, oh, a paper is never good. you start like 3 weeks ago and it's kind of 2 minutes before the deadline, you kind of get to that final, like you've connected all the dots. So I think that mindset of just prototyping and breaking things apart, bringing it together and knowing that nothing is ever perfect, has taken me through, because you're never perfect at Wellesley. There's always more to be done. So yeah, I think those three things.
Nice.
Sure.
And I love hearing from all of you how broad everything really is and how everything connects. And a lot of the skills I think that you all touched on are those big transferable skills that, we talk about, but sometimes it's hard when you're in like the depths of classes and finals and midterms, which is like constantly happening on Wellesley's campus. It's hard to think about those bigger picture things. But then as you get into the professional world, that's really kind of what you do fall back on, kind of, Emma, like what you were saying. That's what you always have. Even if you make a change, even if you decide you're going to try something else, you always have those. And I really appreciate you, Kavi, sharing, the tears and the uncertainty, because I think it's an experience so many people go through, but we don't talk about it. We're not like, oh yeah, I was crying, talking to a parent on the phone every day, trying to figure out what was going on. Or a lot of it is very much like, oh no, I have my life figured out, I'm good. But it's very normal to be in those situations where things don't work out, or you make a different decision, and it's not always an easy decision to go through, but sometimes it can be really important. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because that's always a tough thing to admit, but very important for a lot of people. Nice. So we're going to jump around our question a little bit, because I want to make sure we also get to questions from the students. But on this line of kind of major declaration and major thinking, from your career and life experiences that you've kind of gone through, do you believe that there is a perfect major for someone out there, for our students? And kind of how have your experiences impacted your opinion on that? I know it's a tricky one.
I can take a stab at it.
Sure.
I'm sure like Emma and Claire have really important things to say about kind of those shifts that happen. But I think for me, the big realization was when I was at Wellesley, I was like, by 24, I need to be this and that and this and have everything figured out. And there's this like type A mentality, right? Like at Wellesley. And I was also coming from a very different cultural background, where that was an added layer of, having to pay off my mom's debts, like having to be financially stable, giving back to my community, because they were like, you made it, so we're all like counting on you to like make it work for us. And I also realized that life is like, it's so long. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you think you need to, you create these milestones in your head that, oh, by 22, when I graduate, I need to figure out my perfect career. I've set up for it. So by 30, like I brought a house, I've got my promotion, I have all of these things. But these are such artificial milestones if we set for ourselves that don't really align with probably what we want to do, what makes us happy. And I think for me, honestly, the perfect major is whatever brings you the most joy in your everyday. And that was like that big question I went to. Because when I dropped my econ major, I was like, I could probably work for JP Morgan and make a ton of money. And I would, be able to be financially secure. But I realized that I didn't enjoy the everyday of being an economist. I didn't enjoy the everyday of being an investment bank, where I had friends who had so much joy from crunching the numbers. But for me, I was like, okay, what brings me joy every day? And I realized I loved the anthropology classes I was taking on the side. And I love these film classes where I was taking like these like old cameras and going around Boston taking pictures. And I think it's also this idea like life is so long that you can have so many faces and so many chapters that in this like 5 years, you're an anthropologist. In the next 5, you discover you love teaching. And then you take those experiences and become a teacher. So I think it's realizing like taking it like in 2-year, 3-year chunks instead of how does Kavi plan her entire life? Which makes you realize that, oh, maybe this is a way for me to decide. And I think the second thing was, I also realized that you can actually curate a learning experience beyond your major. So I was like, I was doing research at the MIT Media Lab because I was really interested in this entertainment, civic space, people I was talking to, like just side projects I was doing. museums I was going to in the evenings. I thought that this was all a part of that learning experience beyond the major. So I think that big question was what brought me most joy in my everyday, and kind of figuring out how I can curate that experience. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Oh, that's perfect. No, again, I think it's good to hear from someone who is, in the professional world, that is such a crucial aspect of really thinking about your decision. Not that it has to be a final decision, but that enjoyment piece isn't something that we want to ignore, but we want to incorporate into the decisions that we make. So I think that's amazing. Claire, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of the things Kavi said. I think that when you are out of Wellesley, the ways that obviously you're going to have the skills that you take in your day-to-day, but when it comes to I don't know, interviewing for a job or thinking about graduate school or talking about your experience, what really matters isn't the major, it's the narrative. And I think that that's a lot of I would really echo what Kavi said in that sense of it doesn't, if you're really interested in studying, I'm really interested in studying multinational corporate income taxation. So econ was probably a pretty good thing for you, right? But I could have studied poli-sci, and if the political part of it is what interests me, as long as the narrative is kind of there of how did I come to this decision of how did I find this interest? What have I done to kind of underscore these skills or kind of help me kind of get to this point in my life. And so I think there are many, many, many paths that kind of can all converge at the same point. And so as long as you're able to, I think, draw a high level takeaway from whatever your path was, it doesn't matter which way you got there. That's I think what I would say about it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Any other thoughts, Emma?
Well, nothing groundbreaking. I think Claire and Kavi, I just absolutely agree with you guys. And I think you both said it beautifully. But I guess I'll just briefly add that, on top of everything that was just said, I think, first of all, no, I don't think there's a thing as, your perfect major. I think maybe it's a bit more of the answer to the question, right now, what is the most kind of personally productive and fulfilling path or just use of my time studying at Wellesley? And it's totally fine if that answer, or major is different than what you end up working in, because again, everyone's experience is different. But I think I just want to really echo again, two pieces from both Kavi and Claire's answers, which is that, sometimes folks are faced with a difficult decision between, something that they're passionate about and then maybe another interest that will bring them some sort of financial security or, stability or whatever, other reason they're pursuing that interest. And I think it's okay. I think you just, again, have to be compassionate with yourself. It's okay if you make that choice because only you know your own personal situation and only you can make the best choice for your situation, basically. But I would also, say and encourage everyone that, life is also, it's long, but it's also too short to not do some of what you love at Wellesley, right? So that could be, as Claire was saying, curating your, and Kavi were saying, curating your learning experience. That could be adding a second major. That could be adding a minor, joining an org, doing an internship. If your interests are not contained within the major, it's totally fine to seek out other experiences that will help you get the learning that you want, basically. Yeah. So I don't think there is, and I don't know if there needs to be a perfect major for every person because it's what you make for yourself, I think, And
it's probably a loaded question. Clearly, I have a bias and just even the way it's written, but I think it's always helpful because often that's not how we perceive the major decision. Is oh no, there is one major and there's a correct answer. And so I think it's always nice to hear from those who have gone through it to be no, not really. It would be nice if that was the case. However, it's a lot more complicated than that. And there are a lot of factors that come into play. So again, I thank all of you for being so open about it. I'll do one final one and then I will open up to students. So be ready. It's exciting. It's the final time. But I love this question. I heard this at a conference and I have now stolen it for every panel that I've ever done. If you were to pack a backpack for a sophomore halfway through their fall semester, what is one thing that you would pack for them? And this can be a physical item, it can be something metaphoric, but what would you put in your backpack?
I can jump back in again because I think I have I immediately know the answer to this question. It's a very short answer to this question. A spare charger or multiple spare chargers, either for a phone or a laptop or both. And Kavi, that's not a dig at you for being late. I promise that's like the answer I had in my head before. But there is just nothing more devastating than like trying to power through an assignment that's due in like literally 2 to 5 minutes and then just having a low power and then your stuff just totally shuts down and you are doomed. You have to, you know, bum someone else's electronics or like a charger or something, or you have to like sprint to the library. Ugh, spare chargers.
Love that. That's a great one. Spare chargers.
You know, Emma, I'll take it off you because like you think this works, but it actually doesn't. Because you put it in your bag and there's like it's broken inside. And then you're in some new place and you're like, what that's the space of chargers? Like, I don't know anybody here. So I would say a second charge. I would add 2 items. I would add a second charger to Emma's list. And I think I would actually pack like a really nice warm blanket.
Yeah.
Because for the first time when I went to therapy, I was like, what is therapy? I was like, you know what? Sometimes I just want to leave and just like go into like a nice cozy place. I want to go home is what I said, like a nice cozy home. And she said, you know what, you can create a home when times get tough. And that could be like a soft toy or a blanket or a little corner in your room that's always like your nice, safe place. And since then, I've been carrying like a really nice, I don't think I have it here. I like a nice, like fuzzy blanket. And wherever someone's rude to me or like I go through a tough time, I just like cover myself in it and just like stay there for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So whatever makes you feel fuzzy and warm inside. Yeah.
I love it. We have fuzzy warmth. We have practical chargers. Claire, what have you got?
I'll round us out. I would say like enough flex points to buy a snack. I think that something that I've learned that like in the post-Wellesley era is like the value of taking 20 minutes, which doesn't seem like a lot of time, but like walking outside and going and getting a snack and like breathing a little bit and then coming back to what you were doing, you feel like a new person. You really do.
Yeah.
And so I think that like, I really liked like, it is so invaluable living on Wellesley's campus and having all these trees and kind of winding meandering paths and just like friends that you can go drop by and like weird places to study all over the place. Yeah, I think enough of an incentive to go and like get outside for a little bit. That's what I would pack.
I always am one who like, I need a snack that I don't already possess. Also, like I need to be like walk and go get other snacks because those are the fun snacks.
Yeah,
Those
like the
are
reach snack. That's what
Yeah.
I have to do.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, I want to turn it over to students. So are there any questions from the audience? You can come on up. You have to ask our panelists live in real time. You can actually see students, which is nice. They are here, I promise.
You know what? Like for a second, that slipped my mind, even though that was in the email. Oh my God, they're actually real people.
Yeah. So if you
Yes,
want
yeah,
introduce
you're
yourself,
probably big in that screen.
you can
Hi.
introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Hi, I'm Bella. I'm a sophomore, and I wanted to ask because we're in the middle of midterms right now. So putting things in perspective, how would you guys rate like a successful college career that doesn't necessarily have to do with like straight A's in every class? Can you be successful without like top tier academics?
Great question.
I can have one sentence answer. Honestly, I think like my big takeaway was because I happened to give a speech during commencement and I was like, oh, what are the top takeaways? Like what's big in my list? And the first one was your GPA doesn't matter. And breaking news. I will caveat that if you are going straight into, let's say, a PhD, or if you want to pursue a very specialized graduate program like in econ or psychology, yes, they would look at your GPA. But having spoke to so many sort of academic counselors and admission staff after coming to grad school myself, I realized that applications are so much more holistic now. They're not even looking at, for example, I'm applying for a PhD, they're not even looking at GREs anymore. So it's really about that holistic application, and that I think Claire said it perfect. It's about the narrative. So I think, and if you're not going to pursue academia, and I think even with graduate school, if you're going into work and then pursuing graduate school after, it's so much more about your experiences and narrative you tell, your learnings, rather than your GPA when you are like 21. So I think like I'm like now, I'll be 28 next year. So I realize like how less my GPA even matters. And I would really say it's so much like I wish like instead of like spending time like cramming for a midterm, I just took a walk or went down to the Will or hung out with friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I can add on to that. I think the mark of a successful like Wellesley career in my mind is like you find the place, so you find the like things that make you kind of want to buy in. And so if that's a class that you love and you love the professor and you think that this is exactly what you want to do after Wellesley, and you're going to probably use the things you learn in this class for the next 5-10 years of your life, then yeah, you should buy in and you should like work really hard at the class. But I think that what that means as well is like, you don't have to like commit, like spread yourself so thinly over every single thing you do. I think that it's really about figuring out like, what is it that I'm super passionate about? Is it about like creating a community on campus through this org that I'm leading? Or is it about like connecting to the greater community through doing like something like service or civic engagement? Or is it about like finding this one class that's like, oh my God, this was made for me. And so, yeah, being able to come out of Wellesley with a greater sense of like, where is it that I want to be in the world once I'm like out of the Wellesley bubble. And so, yeah, like in some regards, that is going to be academics, right? Like you want to be able to speak like from a position of like, I don't want to say prestige, but like from a position of like, I did this stuff and I did well in it and I know what I'm talking about, but that doesn't have to be everything. And I think that like, that's again, like with the major decision, like you shouldn't have to push yourself to something that you don't want to do just because you think it's what's important in the real world, because it's probably not. Yeah.
I definitely agree. Again, I just want to, +1 to everything that my wonderful fellow panelists said. But I think I would also add that, again, be kind to yourself, because a lot of the time, success in a class actually has to do with factors that are just kind of out of your control, if that makes sense. So it could totally be down to like a professor's teaching style, like how the structure of the class goes. And it could just be totally incompatible with the ways that you best learn and study and perform on tests and stuff like that. And so in that case, I think, it's good, like Claire said, to focus your energies on kind of those core classes that you think will really be valuable in building your skills and your knowledge and, just overall transferable experiences to your future career. But other than that, there are some ways and like hacks that you can do to make Wellesley work for you GPA wise and class wise. So taking advantage of I think you get like 8 semesters or something of pass fail, which I took such great advantage of. I highly recommend everyone do it if they can, or, it could be switching out of a professor's class if you can already sense that, hey, I actually don't like their teaching style. There's another section that's open. I'm just going to hop over there. And, that's the difference between, the grade you want and then the grade that you didn't want, but you struggled really hard for because, it just wasn't a good fit learning style wise. So I think taking advantage of the ways and the hacks that are kind of there to make classes work for you is just a really important thing that you can do. And it's okay for you to do it. It doesn't mean that you're any less smart or capable as your peers who like decide to stick it out in the hard section for whatever reason. It just means that you're making the smartest and best decisions for you. So I think just don't be ashamed, just embrace it. Ask for that extension, ask for an extra day, switch sections, it's totally fine. I have done it many times.
And talk to people about it, because again, there's your class dean or, me as your advisor for career exploration, or our, multicultural advisors, or just different people across campus who I think want to see you feel successful. We want to make sure that you're in the situations that put you in, whether it's that you're super excited about what you're taking or you're feeling more comfortable, but sometimes it's hard to navigate on your own. So also know that you can like talk to your friends about it, talk to us about it, so that we can help you figure out what makes the most sense for you and your situation specifically. So I think we have time for one more question. So any other students? Yeah, come on up. This is lovely. We're figuring this out as we go, but I'm loving this. This is
I
great.
love those hybrids. And just the next time you can bring us on camp.
Hi. Okay, my name is Nihal. I'm a sophomore. So I have a question regarding internships because like if you are not or like regarding the summer in general, if you are not sure about what do you want to major in, how are you going to make choices for the summer? Because like I have this scenario in my mind where I'm afraid that I decide major too late, that I only have one summer to experience it in the real world. So that's why like I'm asking the question. And that's
Great
thanks.
question.
I can talk about this.
Yeah.
As someone who did and then decided not to go into the whole finance route. I think that summer internships are very important in helping kind of people understand your interests and helping you understand your own interests. But the whole point of them is experiential learning. And so it's really about like, not so much like, oh, if I want to go into international relations, am I working at a place that does international relations? It's like, oh, if I want to do a career in the long term that involves some like research, I should be doing some research. Or it's like, oh, if I like, I'm really interested maybe in a career where I'm directly working with people and I'm helping like individuals like do X, Y, and Z, then like maybe I should try and find an internship where I like am face to face with people instead of like working behind the scenes on something. And so I think it's way less important, like the topic of what you're doing so much as like, what skills are you like taking away from that? And I think that like, to be like frank about it, like when you put it on the resume, they don't really care about like, what is it that you did? They care about like, what are like the verbs, right? Like what skills did you learn and do? And like, how do those transfer to whatever it is that you find out later? And it's totally fine to do an internship, to learn a lot, and then be like, I hated that. I think that that's like fine, because that then when you go on to the next thing, you're even more certain that that's like a better fit for you. And so I think there's like totally no shame in doing something and being like, oh yeah, I was interested in this, so I thought I would try it out, and it's definitely not for me. And we can like go forward from there.
Any other thoughts anyone would want to add?
Sure, I can add, I see that we're at kind of at time, so people might be scurrying out. But, of course, again, I agree with everything Claire said. I would also add that, if you're worried, and I was also worried about this, it kind of feels like the breaks or the summer, your first year, you kind of have to, do something related to what you think you're interested in, or find that internship that's really going to help you be like, okay, I'm set, I'm certain, this is the major that I want to do because I had this internship. And if you can get one, that's awesome. But, you definitely don't need to beat yourself up if you can't get kind of that perfect pivotal summer internship, because if what you're looking for is kind of insight into the field or career path that you think your major will lead you to, you can do an informational interview. You can read articles or bios from LinkedIn professionals, people who are interviewed and just have a little blog and like to talk about their day-to-day. It doesn't necessarily have to be an internship that kind of confirms or denies that major path for you. And also I think, something I took advantage of as well is the Hive does a lot of like short experiential learning opportunities that are outside of the summer, I believe. So like the winter, and, you can do kind of service trips with civic engagement during spring break. So it doesn't have to be an internship that kind of helps you confirm or deny, is this the path for me? And even if, you decide to do that path because you don't get the internship and then you change later in your Wellesley career, that's okay. At least you realized it before you graduated Wellesley.
I want to thank you all again for taking time in your afternoons and your mornings to be here. If we can give them a round of applause, I'm sure they'll hear it.